We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. We have ignition.
हम ज़मीन के रहने वालों की तरफ से आपको खुश आमदीद कहते हैं।
Hola y saludos a todos.
Greetings and friendly wishes to all who may encounter this Voyager and receive this message.
Hello. 안녕하세요. Hello. อย่าได้ใจอย่าชิมาเอาแต่เสียงมาพวกเราในธรณีนี้ขอส่งมิตรจิตมาถึงท่านทุกคน Hello.
เสียงนี้เป็นอะไรล่ะมันเข้าเว้ยเจ้าทำเกิดแต่กับบ้านเลยเจ้าทำเอา We step into the universe with humility and hope.
Make a deal.
Hello, greetings mga ka-spacers natin out there from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And sa lahat ng ating mga ka-spacers out there worldwide and netwide, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. This is your ka-spacer and space commander, Prof Jun Cajigal, and I would like to welcome everybody to this episode of COSMOQUEST, a podcast. So bago po tayo magsimula sa ating pag-uusapan ngayong araw na ito, ipakiusap ko lang po sa mga ka-spacers natin out there to please like and share itong ating episode ngayon ng COSMOQUEST para makarating at maabot natin ang maraming tao, lalong-lalo na po yung mga kabataan, yung mga estudyante natin out there, para ma-inspire naman po sila to love the sciences. So ang pakiusap ko lang po mga ka-spacers natin dyan to please like and share and mag-heart react po kayo sa ating episode ngayon para alam ko na nandyan kayo at buhay na buhay at gising na gising. Alright, at very interesting po yung ating pag-uusapan ngayong episode sa ating podcast, COSMOQUEST. So ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon is there life beyond planet Earth? So ito yung siguro marami ang nagtatanong, no? Talagang meron bang buhay sa labas ng ating mundo? Is there life beyond planet Earth? So siguro bago po natin masagot itong katanungan na to, isipin na lang po natin bakit kaya ang mundo natin, why is it that the Earth is the only planet in the solar system that is capable of sustaining life. Doon naghahanap po tayo ng mga ebidensya na posible nga na magkaroon ng buhay sa ibang planeta like Mars or Europa or si Enceladus. So bakit kaya ang planeta natin, why is it that there is only life here on Earth? So siguro bago tayo mag-proceed sa para masagot natin yung tanong na yan, siguro pag-usapan natin kung ano ibig sabihin ng buhay, what is life in the first place? Di ba po mga ka-spacers? So what is life? Yan po yung tanong. Alright, so ang buhay, what is life is the scientific community. Ito po yung medyo controversial na sagot na the scientific community still cannot agree on the definition for life. No? Medyo pinagtatalunan pa yung doon. Tagal-tagal na po nito. No? Very basic po na tanong. The scientific community still cannot agree on a definition for life. So, para mabigyan tayo ng idea kung ano ba talaga ang buhay, what is life? No? So, we recognize life by what living things do. Yung manifestations na may buhay ang isang bagay. Alright? We recognize life by what living things do. So, organisms in nature possess unique features that allow biologists to identify an object as alive. So may mga unique features po na nakikita natin para masabi natin na ang isang bagay or object ay buhay. Alright, and they are as follows. So you have organization, homeostasis, reproduction, growth and development, response to a stimulus, and meron pa adaptation and evolution. Yan. So hindi natin nadagdag dito sa ating listahan. So organization po mga ka-spacers, homeostasis, reproduction, growth and development, response to a stimulus, and adaptation and evolution. So those are the unique features that allow us to identify an object as living or alive. So isa-isahin po natin itong nasa listahan natin. So let's start first with organization. Alright, ang ibig lang sabihin ng organization is that living things are made up of the following. No? So lahat ng mga living things, the basic unit is the atom. Alright, and atoms bond together to form molecules. Diba po mga ka-spacers? Now, molecules, they bond together to form organelles. Yan, pag-uusapan po natin yung mga organelles na yan. Then, organelles basically form the living cell. The cell is the basic unit of all living things. Then cells with similar functions combine to form tissue. A tissue is a group of cells that perform a specific function, mga ka-spacers. Then tissues with more or less similar functions form organs. Alright, like for example, yung puso natin, no? Our heart is made up of several tissues. Right, like muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, meron din siyang nerve tissue. Alright, and different organs that perform similar functions form a body system. No, like for example, yung circulatory system natin. So, you have different organs like the heart, the blood vessels, ayan po. Alright, then different body systems form an organism. No, kagaya natin po, so our body is made up of several body systems like the skeletal system, yung muscular system, digestive, respiratory, excretory system, yan po. Right, so different body systems form an organism. Then an organism basically form populations of living things, and they form communities, then ecosystem, then basically different ecosystems form the Earth's biosphere. So yan po, that's what we meant by organization. So ang ano po natin, existence po natin, we are organized into atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, ganun po. Yun ang ibig sabihin po ng organization. Alright. Next, we have homeostasis. Now, ano ibig sabihin ng homeostasis? Now, homeostasis has something to do with regulating external and internal conditions. So, ibig lang sabihin po nito, the ability of an organism to maintain balance or equilibrium. So, lahat po ng living things, they are capable of maintaining balance or steady state or equilibrium. Like for example, nasa picture po natin, yung taong ito ay nilalamig. So in order to maintain or to regulate body temperature, our blood vessels, they constrict, no? Constriction of blood vessels, meaning lumiliit po yung diameter ng blood vessels natin to conserve body heat. Ayan po, no? And also shivering, no? Because muscle action produces body heat para medyo tumaas po yung temperature ng katawan natin kasi malamig po sa labas. Alright, so that's one way of regulating our body temperature, and that's homeostasis, no? Maintaining balance or steady state or equilibrium. So opposite naman po, pag mainit po sa labas, our blood vessels, they vasodilate, meaning yung diameter po ng blood vessels natin ay lumalaki, no? So this will allow excess heat to be released, and also sweating, no? Kaya tayo pinapawisan para mag-evaporate, and as the water in our sweat is converted into gaseous form, it takes away heat from the skin, giving us a cooling effect. So ang tawag po dyan ay evaporative cooling. Alright po, so ayan po, no, those are some of the ways in which our skin regulates body temperature and eventually maintaining homeostatic balance or homeostasis or equilibrium or steady state. So lahat po ng living things, they are capable of homeostasis. Alright, another quality exhibited by all living things is the acquisition of nutrient materials and energy. right? And living things, they can convert energy to power life processes. Yan, kaya tayo kumakain, we get our energy from the food that we eat. Sa mga plants naman, they get their energy from the sun to power photosynthesis. And we call that metabolism, mga ka-spacers. So in the case of human beings, gaya po natin, we get our energy from the food that we eat. Kasi may chemical energy po yung kinakain natin in the form of glucose and lipids. Alright, these are energy containing molecules na carbohydrates and lipids. Yan, fats, carbohydrates. Then pag inano natin yan, we take in carbohydrates and fats, kino-convert yan into ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, to power our metabolic activities like growth, cellular respiration, excretion, reproduction, ganyan. And at the same time, as metabolic activities in our body progresses, we generate heat. Ayan po. So, ganyan po yung natin, we are capable of converting one form of energy to another. Ayan po. So, yun yung ATP, That's our body's energy currency. So, all living things, they're capable of converting energy and use it to power metabolic activities, mga ka-spacers. Alright, another important property exhibited by living things is the ability to reproduce. Alright, so the ability to produce another organism, that's reproduction. And there are two types of reproduction, mga ka-spacers. So we have asexual, like in the case of bacteria. When you say asexual reproduction, walang sex cells na involved, or there are no sex cells involved. Because a means without in Latin. Asexual. Sexual means there is the involvement of the sex cells, the sperm or pollen and the egg. Kaya lang in the case of bacteria, the bacteria simply splits into two. Ang tawag po natin dyan ay binary fission, in the case of bacteria. And this is one type of reproduction called asexual reproduction. Alright, sa kaso naman po natin, we have sex cells, sperm and egg, so that's sexual reproduction. Alright, another unique property of living things is growth and development. Alright, and also response to external stimuli. Alright, kunyari yung mata natin, our eyes, they can detect light stimulus. Yung tenga naman natin, sound waves. And nagre-react po tayo. Alright, so living things, they respond to external stimuli. Ang tawag po dyan sa biology ay irritability. Irritability is the ability of organisms to respond to stimuli. Alright, like yung makahiya na yan, di ba? Pag hinawakan natin yung makahiya, titiklo po yung dahon. Alright, yung mata naman natin, pag nasa na may flashlight na inano nyo sa mata natin, medyo ililit yung pupil. Alright, ililit yung pupil. Yung pupil, that's the, yan po yung itim na yan po sa gitna ng mata natin na lumiliit because of the iris. Yan po yung ating response pag may bright light or pag dim yung ilaw, either lalaki yung opening ng pupil or liliit. So we respond to external stimuli. And ang tawag po natin dyan ay irritability. And lastly, living things, they have the ability to evolve, or to change over time. Now, bakit ganito? Because living things, they have to adapt to the external environment. Alright? So, para makapag-adapt ang isang living thing sa environment nila, medyo magbabago po ng konti yung ibang anatomical structures nila para maka-adapt po sila. Adaptation is the ability of a living thing to become suited to its environment. Eventually, habang magtatagal yan for millions of years, magbabago na yung kanyang phenotype or yung physical appearance. Yung tawag dyan ay evolution. Changes over time. Alright? Okay po. So, ayan po yung evolution. and adaptation. Alright, now what qualities scientists believe are necessary for life to exist? Alright, kasi ang sinasagot po natin, bakit ba may buhay dito sa Earth? No? Bakit wala tayong makita so far so far na may buhay sa Mars? Though naghahanap na po tayo, nandyan na po yung Perseverance rover sa Mars. Alright, and marami na rin tayong pinadala na space probes sa solar system natin, no? Like yung Cassini, yung New Horizons, Voyager. So yan po yung tinatanong natin, no? Bakit wala pa tayong nakikita, no? Hanggang ngayon Earth pa lang ang may buhay. So what are the qualities scientists believe are necessary for life to exist? Alright, so siguro bago natin masagot yung tanong na yan, sagutin muna natin to, yung bago natin ma-enumerate yung mga qualities na yan. Paano ba nagsimula ang buhay dito sa mundo? Alright, how did life on Earth started? So I hope you will bear with me mga ka-spacers, at ako yung magkwekwento muna kung paano talaga nagsimula ang buhay dito sa mundo. So again, shout out po sa mga ka-spacers natin ngayon na nanonood sa ating episode ng COSMOQUEST. And again, bago natin sagutin tong tanong na to, pakiusap ko lang po to please like and share itong ating episode ngayong araw na ito. Okay. So mga ka-spacers, bago po tayo magpatuloy sa pagsagot dun sa tanong na how did life on Earth started, mag-pop quiz po muna tayo. Alright, so kung gusto niyo pong sumali, just type in your answer in our comment section below. And I would like to encourage all of you mga ka-spacers na sali na po. At napakadali lang po ng tanong na ito. And I would like to hear from you. Gusto ko pong malaman kung gising na gising pa po kayo at buhay na buhay. And kung gusto niyo po magpa-shoutout po, just type in your name and your location para malaman ko po naman kung saan po nakakaabot ang ating live stream. Alright, so ito po yung katanungan. Madali lang po ito mga ka-spacers. Alright? Okay, so ito po yung tanong. You have a time machine with a dial that you can spin to send you randomly to any time in Earth's history. If you spin the dial, travel back in time about 2 billion years, and walk out of the time machine, what is most likely to happen to you? Ayan po yung tanong. So ito yung pagpipilian po ninyo mga ka-spacers. Letter A, you'll be eaten by dinosaurs. Letter B, you'll suffocate because you'll be unable to breathe the air. Letter C, you'll be consumed by toxic bacteria. And letter D, nothing. You'll probably be just fine. So ano po mga ka-spacers? Ayan, kung alam niyo po yung sagot or kung gusto niyo sumali, gusto nyo magbaka sakali, just type in your answer in our comment section below. Ayan po. Alright. Okay na po mga ka-spacers. Ayan, TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. Alright, so ang sagot po mga ka-spacers, ayan, so may mga chat monitors po tayo na nagmo-monitor dun sa mga sagot ninyo. Alright, ang tamang sagot po ay letter B. You'll suffocate because you'll be unable to breathe the air. Ngayon, bakit po? No, bakit? 2 billion years at lumabas kayo sa time machine na yan, yun ang mangyayari sa inyo. No, you'll suffocate because you'll be unable to breathe the air. Alright, so umpisa na po natin yung kwento, how did life on Earth started. Alright, so yung mundo natin po, no, the oceans covered most of the whole planet Earth, no, about several billion years ago. Just 2% to 3% of the Earth's surface would have been land compared to 28% today. dito. So ganyan po yung mundo natin noon. Siguro mga 3 billion years ago. Ayan, the oceans covered most of the whole of the planet. And just 2% to 3% of the Earth's surface would have been land compared with 20% today. Alright po. Ayan po yung ating mundo natin noon, no? So maraming volcanic activity and maraming meteorite, asteroid or comet bombardments po noon. Alright. Ang early atmosphere po natin was formed through the process of outgassing. So ito po yung mga binubuga ng mga volcanoes. So yung mga volcanic activity na nangyayari noon created our atmosphere through the process of outgassing, which is the outpouring of gases from the Earth's interior po galing sa mga volcanoes. Yung mga binubuga nila, yun eventually that created our early or primordial atmosphere. Ayan, so na-imagine nyo po, no? So mainit po noon, no? Because of intense volcanic activity. Then basically our planet was covered with oceans. Alright, and yung atmosphere natin noon was crushingly dense. Ayan, so I hope you can visualize po, no, habang kinikwento ko po sa inyo. So the atmosphere was crushingly dense, meaning makapal, and completely unbreathable. And yung primordial gases that were present in the primordial atmosphere includes the following, like carbon dioxide, ayan, from volcanic activity. Then you have methane, CH4, carbon monoxide, CO, ammonia, CH3, hydrogen, and water vapor. And wala pang oxygen noon, no? Our primordial atmosphere, walang oxygen. Oxygen was absent then. Alright, so kung makikita nyo po, no, poisonous yung mga gases noon, no? Makapal na yung atmosphere natin. Our atmosphere was crushingly dense, and ito pa yung mga toxic gases, no? Like carbon dioxide, methane, carbon monoxide, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor, and there was no oxygen. No, talagang kung pumunta kayo dyan, na lumuwas kayo dun sa time machine, it's walang oxygen. Talagang you'll suffocate to death. So ayan po, no, very toxic po yung mga gases na present sa ating primordial atmosphere. And walang oxygen, no? So kung lalabas po kayo sa time machine, do sa tanong ko po kanina, kung lalabas kayo sa time machine, talagang masasuffocate to death po kayo kasi walang oxygen noon. And because of the absence of oxygen, wala pong ozone layer. No, the ozone layer was absent din. Ozone is O3, so kailangan ng oxygen para magkaroon ng ozone layer. Ngayon, importante to mga ka-spacers, no, itong ozone layer na to. Now, we know today that the ozone layer is a protective blanket in our stratosphere. Kasi ang ozone po nasa stratosphere po yan. And the ozone layer protects us from harmful radiation from the sun, particularly UV rays. So kung walang ozone layer noon, several billion years ago, talagang the Earth was bathed in deadly UV radiation. So talagang bombarded po yung mundo natin ng UV radiation. Alright, so that makes the evolution of life really not conducive. And plus the fact may mga lightning po, no, intense electrical discharge, mga lightning sa ating atmosphere noon. Alright po, so yan po yung condition ng ating primordial Earth. Yan yung primordial atmosphere and yung ating primordial Earth. Alright, so these primordial conditions, ito po yung catch niyan, do kahit na medyo hindi conducive po for the evolution of life, yung condition po ng mundo natin noon, primordial conditions plus lightning provided the ingredients to cause itong mga chemicals na to dun sa oceans natin na tinatawag natin na primordial soup to react. So may mga chemicals na dyan sa primitive oceans natin. Ang tinatawag natin dyan ay primordial soup with the energy from lightning, heat, yan yung heat from volcanic activity. Nagkaroon po ng chemical reactions dun sa ating mga primitive oceans or yung primordial soup. And this led to the formation of the first living cell. Alright. So ito yung tinatawag po natin na a biotic synthesis of organic molecules as proposed by Alexander Oparin. So ang sinabi po niya, because of the energy from lightning, yung electrical discharges, plus you have the heat from volcanic activity, plus you have those gases like carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and yung other toxic gases na nabanggit po natin kanina that would lead to chemical reactions dun sa primitive oceans natin. Ngayon na tinatawag natin na primordial soup. And these chemical reactions will eventually lead to the formation of micelles or itong mga primitive cell membranes. Then eventually nag-form po ng RNA muna po, no? RNA molecule. So eventually, yung mga micelles na to, they enclose the RNA molecule. Eventually, that led to the formation of the first living cell. Ang first living cell po natin ay yung mga anaerobic bacteria. Anaerobic meaning they don't need oxygen in order to survive. Kasi wala naman po talagang oxygen noon. Alright, so these bacteria can survive even without oxygen. Alright. Then eventually, after millions of years, nagkaroon po ng breakthrough sa evolution. Nagkaroon po ng panibagong bacteria with a new pigment called chlorophyll. Alright? So nagkaroon po ng mga tinatawag natin na photosynthetic bacteria or ito yung mga cyanobacteria. And these cyanobacteria, they perform photosynthesis. They were able to harness the energy from the sun. And ang isang byproduct po ng photosynthesis was oxygen. So these cyanobacteria, they were able to oxygenate the primitive atmosphere or the primordial atmosphere po natin. Alright? And may ebidensya po na these cyanobacteria really existed and they oxygenated the Earth's atmosphere. So ito yung mga stromatolites na makikita po sa Australia. Ayan po yung mga stromatolites na yan. So yan po yung evidence na these cyanobacteria really existed. Alright, ayan po yung mga stromatolites na yan. Yan po. Alright, so ito makikita po sa Australia. Ayan, alright, mga fossilized remains po yan ng cyanobacteria. Alright, so the appearance of the cyanobacteria, itong mga photosynthetic bacteria na ito, because of the evolution of chlorophyll that led to this process called photosynthesis. And ang photosynthesis, one of the byproducts of which is oxygen. So these cyanobacteria, they were able to release oxygen for the first time and they oxygenated the Earth's atmosphere that led to the formation of ozone. And alam na po natin na yung ozone na yan protected the Earth from harmful UV rays. So eventually yung mundo natin, no, because of ozone, that made the Earth more conducive for the evolution of higher life forms. Ngayon po itong mga anaerobic bacteria, ayaw nila nung oxygenated atmosphere natin. So medyo nagkakaroon ngayon ng problema yung mga anaerobic bacteria, lalo na yung mga obligate anaerobes na yan kasi ayaw nila yung oxygen. So ang nangyari, because hindi na masyadong conducive sa kanila yan, yung mga ibang bacteria, they engage in a symbiotic relationship with other cells. Ayan, especially yung mga bacteria that resembled mitochondria and yung mga ibang cyanobacteria. So, nag-merge sila with a host cell. Alright, and ito yung tinatawag po natin na endosymbiosis. Alright, so yung changing atmosphere, dahil na-oxygenate na nga po yung atmosphere natin, nagkaroon na ng oxygen eventually, unti-unti because of these cyanobacteria, yung mga obligate anaerobes, yung mga ayaw ng mga oxygen, they engage in symbiotic relationship with other host cells. So I think tinatawag natin na endosymbiotic theory. Now, some anaerobic prokaryotes adapted to the new environment o kaya nga nag-engage ng relationship with other cells. Now, cellular respiration is a process in which oxygen is used to harvest energy from organic molecules. So, how did aerobic prokaryotic living cells led to the formation of another type of cell called eukaryotic cell? Alright, so ito po yung endosymbiotic theory, no? That this is a cell that lives within another cell. Ayan po. Alright, so the endosymbiotic idea eventually led to the evolution of a new type of cell called eukaryotic cell. Kasi yung mga bacteria, they're called prokaryotes. Wala silang membrane organelles and wala silang nucleus. Alright, yung genetic material nakasuspend lang sa cytoplasm. Pero itong mga eukaryotic cells, these are cells with the nuclear membrane. Yung nuclear membrane encloses the genetic material. And meron din silang organelles, no? Membrane-bound organelles. So they were able to adapt to the changing atmosphere. And naging more complex po yung evolution ng life natin because of the appearance of these eukaryotic cells. Ang mga cells po natin ngayon po, most of yan, mga tayo, yung mga hayop, yan, eukaryotes yan. Except yung mga bacteria and yung mga extremophiles that we will mention in our future episodes. So mga ka-spacers, no, ang tanong ngayon, is there any proof of this explanation given by Alexander Oparin on how life on Earth started based on the conditions of the primitive or the primordial Earth? Now, there was an experiment conducted by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, the so-called Miller-Urey experiment. And alam niyo ba mga ka-spacers kung ano yung ginawa nila? So what they did is they performed an experiment to replicate or to simulate the conditions of the primordial Earth to prove that organic molecules like fatty acids, amino acids, nucleic acids could be produced under such primitive conditions. So they came up with this unique laboratory setup. So para tong modified test tube or glass assembly to simulate the conditions of the primordial Earth. Now, ang sinabi ni Alexander Oparin na yung primitive atmosphere is composed of the gases like methane, ammonia, water vapor. So, ang ginawa ni Miller and Urey had introduced the gases that according to Oparin formed the early atmosphere dito sa unique setup na ito. So, inside this setup, you have those primitive gases like methane, ammonia, water vapor. Then according to Alexander Oparin, there was intense electrical discharge in the primitive atmosphere, mga lightning storms. So he exposed yung mixture of gases na yan to electric shocks. So nakikita nyo yung parang sparks na yan dun sa loob ng setup to simulate yung mga electrical discharges in the primitive atmosphere. Then di ba po sabi ni Oparin, mainit yung mundo natin noon because of intense volcanic activity. So dito sa setup na to may boiling water to simulate the conditions of the primitive Earth, yung temperature natin, no? That will simulate yung intense volcanic activity. Alright, so this experiment was conducted for about a week. And after a week, meron pong na-deposit na parang substance dun sa Erlenmeyer flask na yan. And they analyzed the contents and they found organic molecules dyan sa form na yan dun sa loob ng Erlenmeyer flask. So that's quite amazing, isn't it mga ka-spacers, no? So that was the simple experiment made by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey to more or less simulate the conditions of the primordial Earth to prove that such organic molecules could be produced under such conditions. Alright, so with this experiment, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey produced all the 20 amino acids, adenosine triphosphate or ATP, sugars, lipids, and the bases, purines, and pyrimidines of nucleic acids. So this will more or less support the idea of the abiotic synthesis of organic molecules. Alright, so I hope this animation will give you an idea of how life on Earth started and eventually how life on Earth had evolved. Alright, so ayan, no? So isn't that fascinating, mga ka-spacers? Alright. Alright, and eventually that led to the evolution of man. Okay, so ayan po, no? That's to give you an idea of how life on Earth started. Okay. Alright po, so tuloy po natin. And siguro sa susunod na mga episodes, siguro mababanggit po natin yung history of life on Earth. Right now, to understand the role of life in the universe, we must explore the range of environments that might support living things. So para maintindihan natin yung role ng buhay sa universe, we must explore the range of environment that will support living things. Alright, now siguro bago tayo magtapos sa ating episode na ito mahalagang banggitin natin that life as we know it requires the following. Okay, so we have liquid water, napakahalaga po ng tubig, some form of energy like sunlight, chemicals or volcanic activity. Then we have access to organic materials like carbon compounds and a stable environment so that life can originate and evolve. So ayan po, the search for life beyond planet Earth is informed by what we know about life on Earth. So life as we know it here on Earth requires po mga ka-spacers tubig, some form of energy source like sunlight or some chemical reactions, heat from volcanic activity, access to organic materials, and a sufficiently stable environment so that life can originate and evolve. Alright po mga ka-spacers, so the search for life outside Earth has been the search for water. Aminin po natin, yun po yung hinahanap po talaga, no, yung tubig. The search for life outside planet Earth has become the search for water. Now, what is in the case of water? Bakit ang water special? So, ito po yung pag-uusapan natin in our next episode. Alright po mga ka-spacers, so siguro hanggang dito na lang po tayo. And itutuloy po natin itong episode na ito about the search for life beyond Earth. Ang susunod natin po na episode yung what makes water special. So mga ka-spacers, marami pong salamat sa mga nakatutok po ngayon sa ating podcast entitled COSMOQUEST. And again, pakiusap ko lang po mga ka-spacers to please like and share itong ating podcast so that we could reach more people, lalong-lalo na po yung mga estudyante natin so that they could be inspired to love the sciences. Alright po, so hanggang dito na lang po tayo. Again, please like and share, yun po yung importanteng batas natin. Please like and share our Facebook page, the Bed and Society of Young Astronomers. Please like and share also po yung ating Skywatchers Society of Las Piñas Facebook page. And yung aking Facebook channel po, yung The Science Guy Ka-Spacers channel also on Facebook. And yung aking YouTube channel po, The Science Guy Prof Jun Cajigal. So please like and subscribe. Alright, so hanggang dito na lang po tayo. Maraming salamat in behalf of the officers and crew of the Bedan Society of Young Astronomers and in behalf of the administration of San Beda University, Manila. This is your Spacer and Space Commander, Professor Jun Cajigal, saying live long and prosper. Alright, marami pong salamat and see you on our next episode, What Makes Water Special. Bye-bye!
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. Choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.